It is what it is, said the man in the petrol station, putting in the gas. There ain't nothing better in this old wide world than emptying a whiskey glass. 'Cause nobody cares if you're telling all your troubles, if you're wounded all of the time. But when faced with a mountain we climb, when faced with a mountain we climb.
So I'll introduce myself. I am, who am I? Service user. I am. So, and as a service user, like many service users, I'm going through a lot of really difficult stuff right now, which I should have actually got over like months ago, according to what everyone tells me. So I kind of scribbled this thing down about how it feels to be in that place. Don't even know what you'd call it. So I actually, not really poetic, not really anything except an outpouring of stuff. So I call it not even a poem or a thing. I'm trying. I'm not so sure anymore if you really believe me. Not so sure if you think I'm overplaying this. If you think all things considered, I should be getting over it now, letting it go. Sure, you won't say that, not in those words. But the spirit is there, creeping in. I can feel it, wanting me to be, something definable, not this fear storm, sucking small terrors out of the air and coming up dirty. But I'm trying, really I am. I'm trying to find a reason to fight it, to hold on, to believe there's a way through. Safe passage out of guilt and fear, cloying fear, little fears that burrow and grow, trying to believe in something, a wild thing in a sad walled place, the thing that used to live on the shores between me and some invisible sea. I'm trying not to slide into this numb, self-destructive space, trying not to disappear, so easy to die here, to wither in scared, where the shores used to be. I'm trying, but it sounds so much like dying. If only you could see the lights, street lights on a phosphorescent road, ocean lights rolling out behind the sky, behind those planets in my eyes. If only you could see the lights, the dark, the deep blue hope where I've set my sights. If only you could see the lights, the shining of something, frightened, but trying.
Hey, Woodsy, that was fantastic.
Cheers.
Really, really pleased with that. Fantastic.
Cheers, I think.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Steve. I'm the psychologist. Woodsy is my client. Did really well there.
Thank you.
Really impressed. That was really cool. But it's not a real job, is it?
Excuse me?
It's not a real job. It's not something you could do to earn money with.
No, well, I'm trying to.
Well, I'm sure you're trying, but we need to get you a day job.
And, yeah, so.
Yeah, we need to get you a day job. I've already talked to Amazon.
Yeah.
They're interested in taking you on.
Uh-huh.
It's a 0 hours contract.
Uh-huh.
You'd be working hard, but you'd be earning money.
Yeah.
And the other important thing is you'd be off benefits.
Uh-huh.
That would be more efficient for the government. And on a 0 hours contract, you'd be off benefits, but you'd only work when you were called in. And Amazon are actually really good because they supply you with some personal protection equipment. I've got it right here. Okay? Now, I don't know if you know, but their production lines run and run and run. And they don't like people going to the toilet. So what we've done is we've got a catheter for you. Let me put this on for you. There you go. You can see how that works. But what's even better about it, because we're into recycling these days,
This is a drinking bottle.
it's a drinking bottle. It'll save loads of time. because you're no longer just a service user, we're going to give you a new award, a new lanyard. It's Woodsy, the Poet Service User. And we're going to give you that as well. So congratulations on that.
Wow. Gee.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant.
Wow. My own shit sandwich. Thank you for that. If I'm going to be a poet service user, maybe I better try and say poetically how this feels, what this journey is like coming from service user to poet. This is a piece called, basically, the bit that didn't make the leaflets. This is how the journey of someone like me, starting off, falling to bits and going for counselling and not want to get up in the morning, and then suddenly finding himself able to stand up in front of people and read. This is how it really feels. This is for the ones who saw me, the ones who heard, who listened, who chatted, who sat with me and held my hand just tight enough to stop me getting tongue-tied when I rang you for help, who drove me to places that weren't on my map, who brought me the retreat where I got the headspace and the hillside and the shore, and then shocked me somewhere close to home by offering to pay. The ones who heard what nobody else knew I wanted to say. The ones who appeared where nothing like them seemed to fit. The satellites who heard me scream in that clear blue sky where nobody else could see the stars. They heard me spinning out of orbit. Anxiety, depression, panic, the whole set, the whole deal. I was busy being outsourced. I was the parcel wrapped up in angst, passed from body to body, processed and labelled, moved on. Sometimes they got me figured within 10 minutes and then passed me on before giving themselves a chance to realise that nobody can get anyone figured in 10 minutes. I must have looked awesome when printed and box ticked, folded by category, shipped off to wellness, without anything real to grab hold of, without anything real to plant trees on my heart. Nothing does when you're busy being passed from one box to another. My world was a midnight street, a hiding place behind curtains, a curled up snail space in a burned out car, watching rain on a windscreen, and meeting one girl who could listen, meeting one guy who might know, rebuilding the soul I'd forgotten was me in a bit of chat and a listening ear, and a thing they don't outsource that feels like a home, perhaps almost a family, sometimes to a heart that never expected to trust that word again. The meds didn't take me there, nor did the flags, the strategies, the milestone places, the 5-point stars that glow in the dark. Nobody builds their spirit out of labels. Nobody sails their heart home through a tick. But I found the things that don't make the leaflets, the things you find in burned out cars and torched out people. A walk in the rain with their fears on your windows. Streets where nobody has you sussed. The curl of a smile that can warm you right through. The edge of a sea that churns just like you. And the people who see you spinning out of orbit.
So good. So excellent. So now, you have become Woodsy, service user, performance poet, and co-facilitator.
Awesome.
Congratulations. So well done. I'm going to give you a few statistics. Back in 1900, 1 in 1,000 people were recognised as having a mental illness. By 1954, it was 1 in 100. Why is that date so significant? That was when they launched the first antipsychotics and the first very primitive antidepressants. It was also the year I was born. By 2015, it was 1 in 4. Today, there's an argument that just about everybody is diagnosable. Now, is that because people have become more sick? Possibly. Or is it because diagnosis is reaching into normality? In 2017-18, there were 1.3 million people referred to the service called Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. Approximately 400,000 of that 1.3 million benefited from some kind of a statistical improvement. That is represented in the organization's statistics as a 50% success rate. Statistics can tell us anything. I want to give you a few more. Over the last 10 years, there have been 136,000 premature deaths because of austerity. In the 3 months between January and March of this year, there were 16,337 appeals at the Department of Work and Pensions that were overturned. £26.8 million was wasted on running appeals. ESA, 74% of all decisions were overturned. Those living in low-income houses are more likely to suffer with mental illness. A survey by the National Centre of Social Research found that 27% of men and 42% of women in the lowest income bracket experience mental illness. That was compared to 15% of men and 25% of women in the highest income brackets. And yet there's a claim that mental illness does cross social boundaries. Men are 3 times as likely to take their own lives as women. Every year, around 6,000 people take their own lives by suicide across the country. This is an average of 18 people a day. Although suicide affects both genders, 3/4 of all suicides in 2016 in Britain were male. And suicide is on the rise again. While men are more likely to take their own lives, women are more likely to suffer from a mental health condition. 11% of the NHS budget is spent on mental health. At present, mental health problems account for 23% of the burden of disease. This is a medical definition in the UK. However, only 11% of the money given to the NHS by the government is currently spent on dealing with mental health issues. 3/4 of all mental health problems are established by the age of 24. Suicide is the biggest killer of young people in the UK. Suicide amongst the young is increasing. In 2015, 1,660 young people took their lives, all under the age of 35. That was 103 more than in 2014. 75% of young people with a mental health problem are not receiving treatment. Drugs are the most common form of mental health treatment. The number of medicines dispensed for anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, and panic attacks have more than doubled in the past 10 years. Despite aims to cut waiting times, it can take a decade for many young people to receive help. Young people are often not helped until they reach the crisis stage. Up to 300,000 people with mental health problems lose their jobs each year. 89% of employees with mental health problems report an impact on their working life. It's a very interesting set of statistics, and I want you to think about that 50% from IAPT. It's not. It's about 25%. It depends on how you manage the numbers. And I want to read to you now something called the McNamara fallacy. The McNamara fallacy came about from the Vietnam War, and it was based on the idea that if you counted the numbers, America won the Vietnam War. And the fallacy is this. The first step is to measure whatever can be easily measured. This is okay as far as it goes. The second step is to disregard that which can't easily be measured, or to give it an arbitrary or quantitative value. This is artificial and misleading. The third step is to presume that what can't be measured easily really isn't important. This is blindness. The fourth step is to say that what can't easily be measured really doesn't exist. This is suicide. I just want to offer you a little piece from a philosopher called Daniel Dennett that really kind of puts this in context. And he says, the task of figuring out how to put all the familiar things in our manifest image into registration with all the relatively unfamiliar things of the scientific image is not a job that scientists are particularly well equipped to do. Please tell me, Dr. Physicist, just what a colour is. Are there colours according to your theory? Dr. Chemist, can you provide the chemical formula for a bargain? Can you ever frame a clear concept of a bargain or a mistake or a promise? Please, Mr. Scientist, can you measure a poem? Don't get too excited about your lanyard. Mine says, psychologist, guide and mentor to Woodsy the performer, because I'm still the profession.
It's a funny thing when I started doing this Woodsy thing, when I sort of moved from being someone who was just basically a mess and someone to be treated to someone that was asked to come along and read and share and stuff. And then thinking, maybe I can work on it, maybe I can start maybe earning something, develop some kind of community business, maybe get myself off universal credit. It's not really going that way. It's still a struggle. My finances at the moment are a bit lower than a limbo dancing flatworm. But the fact is this, as difficult as it gets, because actually leaps of faith are scary. Lots of self-help books out there saying, I'll take a leap of faith and it'll be awesome. And you'll go down, your life will turn into an adventure, like going down sun-blessed roads in middle of America in a Volkswagen Beetle. It doesn't work that way. Actually, it is scary. Any leap of faith in the world that we've got now is scary because there are a lot of things out there that are just designed to make people lose hope. But all I can tell you is this, from my experience, as scary as the road I am on right now might be, it is probably about 1 billion times better than living under all the mean-spirited little fears that other people would put on me. And that, I guess, is what this piece is about. This is a piece for everybody out there who's struggling and everybody out there who's losing hope on universal credit or some other dire system. This is called Beachcombed. I love the tide. It's my rolling go-to place. The movement, the texture, the churn, mirroring my own. The restlessness mirroring my own, rippled space to float an imagination on, a rhythm to set my heart by, nature's timepiece. The fence at the edge of my world will never hold me, as long as there is a tide. And what of yours? Where do your breakers roll in? Where do you find you? The real you that sits in the core of you and rebuilds itself when anyone wants a piece of you. If you're in an alley full of dross and there's no way out, can you find it there? If you're sitting in an office being talked down to, can you find it there? And if the walls are collapsing around your heart, can you find the part of your heart that doesn't need walls, the part that builds bridges in sad, sacred places and raises cathedrals that sometimes only you can see? It's a scary thing to hold in your soul, scary and lonely and painfully free, rolling ashore on a gallop of waves. But they can't shoot it. They can't jail it. They can't simply steal it and lock it away. Whoever they might be, whatever they might say, they can't simply sanction your tide out of churning or sanction your heart out of being who it is. This is the ocean that churns into you. So stand in it, live in it, and be in it now, and sing in the walls when they tumble it down, because this is the fence at the edge of their world, and this is the ocean that churns into you.
So I wrote this song initially for my mum, but you kind of always write a bit of the song for yourself as well. So it's called Keep It Simple. Keep it simple for me, can't you see that it's already good enough, good enough for me. Keep it simple, can't you see? You've been always more than good enough, good enough for me. Though you complicate your life, you don't really have to worry like you worry all the time. You're a mother, you're a wife, you're a sister, you're a woman too, a little girl still trying to get it right. Keep it simple for me, can't you see that it's already good enough, good enough for me. Keep it simple, can't you see? You've been always more than good enough, good enough for me. Oh, I'd love to see the day when you feel that you no longer have to struggle like you struggle all the time. Oh, I wish there was a way you could see yourself through my eyes, through your baby's eyes. No, you're more than fine. Keep it simple for me, can't you see that it's already good enough, good enough for me. Keep it simple, can't you see? You've been always more than good enough, good enough for me. Good enough, good enough, good enough for me. Good enough, good enough, good enough for me. Good enough, good enough, good enough for me. Keep it simple, can't you see? You've been always more than good enough, good enough for me. Thank you.
You know, I hope you'll excuse me, but yeah, part of the thing with anxiety, I'm seeing him, and he's got like the musical thing going and that beautiful lyrical quality. And that chorus and that guitar playing, my confidence has gone pear-shaped now. I need to just touch base with my therapist here, because I'm kind of, I'm going back into anxiety mode. So I hope you don't mind if I just check with my, because I think I need to let him know how I'm feeling right now. Hello, Steve, you there? Oh, hi. I don't know how to explain where I am now. It's, I'm kind of in that beachy head place, you know. I kind of wake up in such a hollow place, you know. I kind of get now why nobody saw it coming. It lies here, unable to explain, waiting to pull me out of bed, only to tumble off my own beachy head. I try to explain through the curtains, through the fabric of, no, that isn't what happens here. No, that isn't how this feels. I try to pull my way through the world's longest, scariest sentence, hoping you won't ride in, slay the dragon halfway through without even hearing me get to its name and seeing the bit that just looks just like you. If I could explain these things to life, I wouldn't be shaking here so near to dead with my postcard of sunsets from Old Beachy Head. If I knew how to tell you what this was about, why would I need your help anymore, the help I just can't ask you for? Yet I seem such a delicate, breath-burning thing, looking in skips for my second-hand rings, staring through traffic and gazing in windows, never quite knowing where to go, never quite making the heartache dissolve in the flicker of streetlights, the glare of the headlamps, the light of Kaching and that pure subway glow, never quite making the bus stop. Instead, it just circles and rests in my eyes. You never quite get that because you think you know. I look for these train lines to lead me ahead to what everyone knows is my own beachy head. You know?
What do you want me to do?
Well, I'm kind of having a crisis here.
Well, it's kind of your choice.
Excuse me?
It's your choice.
I'm kind of in a self-destructive place here.
What do you want me to do about it?
Well, I could do with some help.
Okay, you'll have to come in. Week on Wednesday.
I'm in a bad place now, actually.
Okay, so what do you want to talk about?
How I think I'm feeling suicidal.
Okay. But you have a choice.
Any of you guys recognize this place where you have a really major problem? You're desperate to give it to someone. It probably takes everything that you've got just to share it with someone. As soon as you give it to them, what do? They kind of make it into something else and hand it back to you so it's not the problem you came in with anymore. So suddenly you don't even know who you are on top of everything else.
There has been much discussion about the nature of language and mental health, and many arguments between psychologists and psychiatrists over what language should be used. Strikes me that this is an argument about power. As the language of the subject, a person, of the professional gaze is rarely used. The domination through formulation, diagnosis, assessment and history seems to be the key. Ever since time began, professionals developed their own specialist languages. Psychiatry and psychology have become particularly adept at technical language. Indeed, many documents are all but incomprehensible to lay people. This use of language creates an aura of expertise and suggests the need for someone to interpret our distress, an expert. The thing for me is that everyone understands their own distress better than anybody else ever could. You are experiencing it, and you try to use your own language to express it. It is then converted into something different by an expert. This conversion is not for our benefit, but for the expert. Our distress is changed into something different, and we no longer own it. We are told what we are feeling. It might be depression, it might be anxiety, it might be psychosis. At the end of the day, that conversion has taken it away from you. There may well be a need for these terms to help provide a generic understanding, but they do not describe our own experiences. Some people may even want these descriptions, as they provide a sense of safety and a sense of security, a sense of understanding of what has happened to them. They should not be denied that right, but neither should they have a description forced upon them if it doesn't fit. The language of psychotherapy, psychology and psychiatry is all about the power of the expert. It makes the expert feel special. It makes them feel needed and separate. There are a few who are now beginning to recognize that language stigmatizes. These are often people who have experienced significant distress in their own lives and understand the alienation that this technical language creates. For example, the patronizing, "You won't understand," when it comes to doing research or writing documents. Just a little caveat about research. 40% of all psychological research has never been replicated. That means that when somebody tried to repeat the experiment that was done first time round, they got a different result the second time. That means it isn't valid. Much of today's research in the NHS, the quoting of numbers, the delivery of papers, is a smokescreen to hide the fact that what is being delivered is neither what is wanted nor what is needed. There has been no independent audit of mental health services delivered by the project called Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. It is also called Industrialised Access to Psychological Therapies. The Audit Commission began an investigation, but it was closed down. If we are to take the distress that people are experiencing across the country seriously, then we need to consider the environmental conditions, community conditions, security of income and education. There is a need for understanding and acceptance to help people to feel safer in their homes, on the streets, and in their workplaces. Not necessarily a physical safety, for although there is still a physical risk, it is not great. No, we are at greater psychological risk than at any time in our history, for now we are able to consider, experience, and begin to understand our distress instead of simply trying to survive. While governments continue to ignore the impact of policy and the impact of a money-based economy on mental health and treat mental distress as though it is some internal, individualized medical problem that is to be fixed, rather than a natural and normal response to a toxic environment, whatever that environment is, work, home, or social, then the problem will continue unabated and become increasingly bad. Until such governments begin to understand the value of people rather than the cost of people, little will change.
Hello again. I don't quite know how to introduce this particular song. It's about a guy named John Hartwell. The song's actually called Song for John Hartwell. And I wrote this after hearing about his case. And, you know, I think a lot of what people have been talking about tonight is that kind of power dynamic that often happens between the expert and the person that the expert is seeing, you know, within this particular field. And that power dynamic can become very unequal, especially when the expert is often an expert in some theory that they've made up themselves. And this is a case of what happens when you take that to its kind of logical conclusion. And it's, like I say, it's about John Hartwell, and he was in the residential facility of a psychotherapist called Jackie Schiff, who is still kind of revered in certain schools of psychotherapy today. And he escaped because her kind of psychotherapy was very abusive. She would hit people with riding crops and all that sort of stuff. And when he was returned, his punishment was that the psychotherapist there, in order to teach him a lesson, stripped him naked, hog-tied him, and put him in a scalding hot bath. And he got third-degree burns over 2/3 of his body, and died about a week later, just after his 18th birthday. And it always strikes me as strange that even though this person's ideas are still being taught and is still somewhat revered in those circles, this kind of history is never brought up at the same time. So this is for John Hartwell. Well, I'm singing this song for John Hartwell, burned to death in a bath at 18, tied up and killed by his own psychotherapist, imposing the brutal regime. And the colleagues, they hail them as heroes, even gave them the highest award. No mention of Hartwell as they stood to cheer and applaud. It's for your own good, all these things that we do to you. We know that you'll thank us someday. Our theories were invented on backs of envelopes, but we won't let that stand in our way. Hail to the ones who are experts and worship the fine expertise. Don't expect evidence, just let them do what they please. And pity the one they call patient whenever the expert draws near. Any fanatic can sure be an expert in their own madcap idea. And it's for your own good, all these things that we do to you. We know that you'll thank us someday. Our theories were invented on backs of envelopes, but we won't let that stand in our way. And now there's a sanitized history where they hide all the bloodshed and pain, so no supple conscience is troubled by John Hartwell's name. The cages are there to be rattled if dead men fall out when we do. So own your own shit just like you tell your clients to do. It's for your own good, all these things that we do to you. We know that you'll thank us someday. Our theories were invented on backs of envelopes, but we won't let that stand in our way. So I'm singing this song for John Hartwell and all victims of experts' excess. So here's to love, mutuality, and some humility won't go amiss. Just accept that you don't have the answer. Just bring me your love, care, and doubt, and speak out for truth, for respect, and for justice when it's the next time to shout out. And let there be no more of things that are done to you. Let's see an end to that day. Hold to the ones who know trust must be won to you. Well, there really is no other way. There really is no other way. Thank you.
So what was the sausage machine like for you?
I'm still not sure whether I'm in or out. It's a bit like being in that old 60s series, The Prisoner. I'm not sure at any point whether I'm actually still in it or whether I've actually got through the door. You just feel everything that you do suddenly feels processed, and you lose who you are.
You become a tick box exercise.
Yeah. It's like the weirdest thing, for example, being on Universal Credit right now, you're sitting and you're chatting to someone, they're being very friendly to you, and you think, oh, I'm bonding with them, it's okay, they won't do anything nasty to me now. And then at some point they'll then say, oh yeah, and you'll go on this course we've got for you, and you think, oh God, please, I don't want to go on this. But it's like, oh no, yeah, you'll go on this because it's going to be awesome, it's going to be great, and this will really suit you, and we've thought about this as though it's like they're really doing you a favour. So you go to some place, and basically as soon as you get there, you know that you're basically in a sausage processing plant with wallpaper, and that's basically what you're there for, and you're there to be processed.
And were you?
Yeah, I've been processed a lot, patronised. I think if you're not sausage shaped, you're kind of doomed as soon as you walk through the door.
Right, okay. And what told you that you were the sausage rather than the processor?
The fact that pretty much everything seemed to be geared to making me go down a certain path, and that everything that told me actually I can get out of this even getting up and being woodsy, it's like, this is great, this is awesome. I can, I can explore this. I can start doing something that I've really wanted to do. I've been a home carer for a while, and now I can actually do something that I'm good at, that I can be a community asset doing it. But then I realised, as far as everyone else was concerned, that was just something to keep me in the right mood, to get me to do what they wanted me to do. Because as soon as possible, they wanted me to drop it and then just go and stack shelves or whatever.
They didn't want you to be a community poet?
No, definitely not.
They wanted you to be a shelf stacker?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or a care worker, which was going back to a place I wasn't ready to go back to.
Right. Did they value anything about you?
Seems sometimes that what they mainly value is your ability to turn up, and that's it.
Okay, so that's another tick box.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are you going from here?
From here, I'm still looking to go somewhere else. I don't know what somewhere else is. I live in a world that actually tries to airbrush out somewhere else wherever you meet it. But I live with the hope that I can still find it. I can still push through doors and windows and find those somewhere else's and go there. Because when I lose that, I lose the hope, and I lose basically what it means to be human.
And each time you go into the processing machine, that hope goes?
Yeah, it gets knocked again.
And you come out and you talk to real people, and what happens?
When I get up and I do this, I just come alive doing it.
Yeah.
I feel I'm me again. I feel I have a voice, I have something to say. When you feel that you've had your voice taken from you, and that you don't have anything that looks or feels or sounds like a voice, when you find a voice again, it becomes the most precious thing in the world.
Maybe this is time for another piece.
Okay. As I say, this has kind of taken over me for a while. I just absolutely love doing the woodsy thing. It kind of reminds me who I've always been, in a way. And I'm actually probably not going to do the piece I thought I was going to do. I actually think I'm going to do a piece now called The Silence of Clouds. I was sitting in the car a while back, doing what I often do, going from one place to another. I'll suddenly stop, park the car up, and just chill, maybe watch the rain on the windscreen, and just enjoy not being anywhere, but just being halfway from one place to another. And I kind of really love that limbo piece. I'm not being processed. I'm not what anybody else expects. I'm just John. Oh, God, I love that place. And it was in that place that I wrote this. It's called The Silence of Clouds. And it was thinking about, basically, kind of like what Alan was saying about the first piece. This is written partly for my mum. I might have known, after all those twists and turns and tangles, my long search for a road trip has finally taken me here, to the place all roads now seem to end. Sitting in the car, the engine switched off, watching clouds skimming the windscreen, contemplating a life in their shadows, wanting to touch something different, trying to wear a face that doesn't fit, wanting to crochet with inappropriate words, because their silence is deeper than any I have known before. Here I am, back with the clouds. It's been quite a journey, unfamiliar territory. The years since Mum died, a voyage through cold places and redemption, and then back again to the rain. To be honest, the vision I found there, universe collapsing in on itself to wear my face and share my pain, bleed my tears clean, that vision still stands, that vision still has power, being held and anchored by something taller and truer than all the things that set your heart adrift. No wonder I take my benediction in the clouds. There's nobody more loved than you, my mother once said, her eyes glowing with secrets my heart wasn't ready to hear. If you ever really knew how precious it is to be able to touch people the way you've done. When I heard this, I generally start to weep or shiver like a dead weight, causing the fragile stillness of her gaze. One day, I told myself, this weight will lift and I will float free to join my friends in the sky, vast and billowy, swift like a shoal of cotton-bud skyfish, or shiny like moonlit angels. These clouds were my ticket to new shores, to the miracles that dripped unseen behind every fresh-painted sunset. I'd whisper my heartache to them as the tide rolled out, and they'd smile back, whispering soft promises to the rhythm of the surf, before drifting off into the night and taking their sunsets with them. One day a new cloud came, swooping into my heart with a brand new set of wings, like a night-painted manta ray, swimming me home across the stars and changing my perspective forever. It rolled out of my mother's eyes, stuttered from sad faces at the bus stop, floated between the strumming of a subway guitar, and wept at the edge of busy shopping centres. Sometimes I believe the vision I see woven within its billow. Sometimes I believe the voice that still echoes in my heart, and the strange miracle of clouds that stop to say hello, carrying the tears of a lonely universe to their deepest, purest home beneath the world's wonky radar. But sometimes I'm still just a dead weight, standing in a shabby, wordless place that feels like it's never going to let me go. But sometimes I can catch people's breath with my stories and fill a room with the silence of clouds. This is a story about identity that I wrote for a friend who was going through a really bad time. I call it The Delicate Disappearance of Debbie. Each day, Debbie rubbed out a few more of her colours. Each day, as people tore off a strip, took her down a peg, and gradually hacked away at her fragile foundations, a little more of her shading began to unravel, unstitch, and generally discombobulate. Debbie never said the right thing or did what other people thought she was supposed to do. They'd said so on all the forms and in all the classrooms and the kitchens and the shops and the offices and the garages, on all the proper places where all the proper colours are made and then tested to make sure they stand up to argument. Debbie never seemed to achieve anything or win anything besides scoldings and sneers and the superior smirks of people who love having soft targets to laugh at. The only thing she ever seemed to do was slink away and disappear. What nobody noticed, of course, was just how completely she was vanishing. They couldn't see the soft clockwork eroding inside her. They couldn't see the unwanted colours dissolving in her tears. Without even realising it, Debbie was becoming quietly brilliant at the strange art of self-erasure. With slow, deliberate strokes, she was rubbing away the very essence of her soul until only a few stubborn splodges of core Debbie remained, floating in a kind of aimless abandon, like shells caught in the tide. And with this splodginess, however, came a startling realization, unlike anything she could previously have imagined in the sad world that had lived behind Debbie's eyes, where everything felt lost and unwanted until it had been given a name. But somehow nothing seemed right until all the names and labels had been peeled away. As the shells and splodges churned around her, Debbie began to realize she wasn't erasing anymore. She was painting herself, weaving herself home through the currents, charting her way to new shores where her shaky voice might at last have new stories to tell. If only she could find the words, if only she hadn't spent so long between the lines on which other people wrote their meanings. If only there was a voice for things unspoken. There were still so many subtle terrors in this place of churn and brushstrokes. But at least now, when people meet Debbie, even if they don't quite understand the colours, even if they don't believe the shell patterns in her eyes, they are never left in any doubt that there are masterpieces waiting somewhere else beyond her shoreline.
How many of you have heard of kintsugi? No? Kintsugi? No? Okay. It is the Japanese art of joining with gold or mending, mostly pots. Most of us, when a pot breaks, throw it away and get a new one. Right now, when it comes to physical and mental health, the Western world is doing just that. We do not value the broken person. We do not think they have worth. Indeed, often we devalue ourselves because of the attitude of Western medicine and society in general to people who have suffered trauma, distress, or even just bad luck in their lives. Experiences that have resulted in the misery that is anxiety and depression, because we have not been resilient and withstood the shattering forces that is today's competitive world. We are not worthy of time and effort to put us back together again. Kintsugi tells us a different story. The mending with gold is a way of putting pots back together that are more beautiful for their flaws. And today's pots are now cast with decorations that mimic kintsugi, simply because it is beautiful. People can be mended and display their flaws and be proud of them for several reasons, not least of which is that the person is a survivor. They have recovered and used their skills and talents to get through a system that resists them and makes them fight every inch of the way back. But also those troubled times produce skills that they would have never gained otherwise. Please don't get me wrong. I am not advocating that people should be put through misery to gain strength and skills. Far from it. Human beings cannot expect the world to be the world of Soma, as in Huxley's Brave New World where there is no stress or striving. But we do need a world in which, as the savage says in Huxley's dystopian future, I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want goodness. I want sin. We need the messiness of experience, but we need to value that experience even if it breaks us. We also need to realize, like the broken pot, the fixing of the brokenness can be as rewarding and as beautiful as the unbroken pot if that fixing is carried with care, thought, and support. Rather than just throwing a few staples at a pot, as the Japanese did before kintsugi, fixes that were ugly and not very practical or effective. Taking care, being compassionate and careful, is more likely to create a beautiful and as an effective pot as before. The difference is now the pot wears its flaws with pride and honesty. The sad thing is that right now, most of the professionals in mental health care try to treat the person in order to cover up the flaws, hide them away, stigmatize them with labels, and use ugly fixes like medication and psychotherapy that is as much social engineering as it is therapy. In those fixes, the beauty, strength, and qualities of the person is lost in a crude celebration of the fixer's ability, rather than the abilities of the person who has come back together and is now rejoined with their own gold. As Justin Alain Chapman observes in The Resilient Disciple, each broken pot is made unique and beautiful as the pieces are put back together. But unless you looked carefully or already knew, you would just see the golden pattern. Perhaps we should be looking for the gold in people and not their cracks. Thank you. Now, I forgot to wear one lanyard. It says, Professor, faster than a switch engine, more powerful than God, speaks directly to God, always right, sets policy regardless of efficacy, rarely steps into the real world of misery. What we want to do now is a symbolic gesture. Do you want to read yours out?
Yep, mine says human being, person, performer, friend and colleague.
Mine says human being, person, performer, friend and colleague. Thank you so much for listening tonight, coming to listen to us. I hope that you've understood the journey that we've tried to make through the pieces and the thoughts that we've had. The disappearance of Debbie was all about identity. What we've tried to describe tonight is how our identities have moved from two very different positions through the process of the therapy that we've done together. And now we are just two people. We're not a service user. We're not a professional. We're just people. Thank you.